Hello. Welcome to Against All Odds.
Against All Odds podcast, y'all.
I'm Rebel Ray, and this is
R. Collins.
How y'all doing? We are glad to be here. Right?
Yep.
Another day.
Another day.
Another dollar. Man, striving for greatness.
Yes.
Today, reflecting on all that has happened. Valentine's Day is coming up. It's a day set aside for love. Definitely.
It is definitely a good day. Love is definitely in the air, for all you lovers out there.
Lovers out there. And for those that don't have a significant lover or partner, you have friends, right? And so we want to be mindful of our friends, especially our single lady friends. Y'all don't get up in a corner. If you got to buy you flowers and send it to your job, just do it then,
I actually know people that do that.
I did it. I did a couple of years.
Okay.
I sent my own self flowers.
Hey,
I said from your boo thing. So, I am my boo thing.
Speaking faith. Hey,
I'm just saying. Take example, love thyself, right? If you're trying to attract someone to love, you got to love yourself first.
Most definitely. If you don't love yourself, you're not going to show anybody how to love you.
There you go.
You know what I mean? And it's very true.
So today we're going to be dealing with a heavy topic. R. Collins is actually going to be co-hosting me. My expertise is trauma. And what we're going to be talking about today is going to be a little deep. We want to caution our viewers.
Yes.
We love our viewers. And so it's very imperative that we take a trauma-informed approach. We take a sensitive approach to what we're going to be speaking about.
Yes.
And I want our viewers also to understand that these are courageous talks that need to be talked about.
Most definitely.
And they need to have an ability for a platform where they're not shamed, where they're welcomed, where the stigma of sexual assault, sexual rape on our Black men can be talked about. We often talk about what happens when there's sexual assault with women, right? And it's even hard to hear that. We hear it with children also, and it's so hard to hear that. But where is the platform? Where are the individuals who are willing to hear about the stories of victim survivors, right? That are within our Black community regarding our men.
But it's not talked about. We don't talk about it, y'all. And with Black families in general, I can only speak for Black families, and I'm sure it's in other races too, but very much so in the Black household, a lot of things dealing in that sort of nature are swept under the rug, and they're not talked about. Grandmama, mama, boy, girl, go, man, go. Sometimes they don't believe, but we don't get
it's not believed, right? And so we have a guest today, but I kind of want to set the platform first before we bring on our guests, because I want us to be, even in our comments, we allow our viewers and our listeners to interact with us in live chat. And so oftentimes we will answer back in that live chat.
Yes.
And so that will continue today. But I do want to be very mindful that we take our time with this. This will probably run over to a second episode. It is a very deep conversation.
Yes.
Please share this video.
Please. It's very important.
It's very important that we get these type of courageous conversations out there. For this platform where we're at now, as far as social media and it being just public and it being at the fingertips, we're going to make it as PG as possible when we're talking about these issues. If anyone has questions, we'll have resources on the next podcast.
Yes.
We'll also have a victim survivor advocate that will bring resources. But today we're really going to just focus on the story that is untold, that's swept underneath the rug. And we want to make sure that even in our comment section, as you're framing your questions, that you be very sensitive and empathetic, right? With a no harm approach. In this, we're being very therapeutic right now, because Against All Odds talks about those things that you're up against, right? Those things that are difficult to talk about.
Yeah, definitely. And, we definitely want to talk about it with the utmost sincerity. And we want to talk about it with caution. There's a lot of things that, even with people's testimonies in general, but this is a very, very powerful testimony. And I think the world needs to hear it. When I heard it, I was like, wow, against all odds for real. You know what I mean? Some people go through some of the most difficult things, and we don't know. We don't understand how many people are going through. Some people like to smile on the outside, and you see the outside part of it, but you don't know the history behind it all. So just bear with us with this. It is a very deep topic, and I want you guys to know that our guest today has a very powerful testimony, and it's very deep. So
definitely. Mm-hmm. So we're going to go ahead and get started. We're going to bring our guests on. We see that we have a couple of viewers. We're monitoring comments, so we have our crew member also monitoring comments, and we also are going to be looking via our devices just to try to keep up with the conversation. So we're going to be putting on our headphones right now. We're going to bring in, and we're going to ask him to introduce himself as he sees fit. Hello.
Welcome.
Hello, James. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, we can. Awesome.
Yes.
And so please introduce yourself, formal title, or whatever, how you want to introduce yourself. It's important that we acknowledge you.
Oh, wow. Thank you for having me. Thank y'all for having me. It's just a blessing to be on tonight. I believe that God is really going to speak to somebody that really is looking for answers, really looking for closure, really looking to be healed from what they're going through. But to some, I might be Prophet James Hewitt. To others, I'm gospel recording artist Jay Hewitt, depending on who's watching. But I'm just James tonight. So I'm glad to be on.
Yes, glad to have you.
Come on, y'all.
Yeah, come on. That's right. Mm-hmm.
So James, kind of starting off, this topic for me, working in the field that I work in and the discipline and concentration that I work in as a therapist, oftentimes I am called to handle our Black children. And our Black children have some of the most similar conversations in therapy. And they're most brought in about the fact that they're not believed. The sexual assault is by a family member, usually an uncle, mom's boyfriend, sometimes dad, grandfather. There's issues of incest. There's issues of even leaving your child with the babysitter. We're going to talk about that, ladies and gentlemen. The babysitter, which oftentimes is a female, will watch the child and have sexual relations and groom the child, and sexually assault the child. And so a lot of times those things are not dealt with or talked about by men, especially our Black men in the community. It's often they're shamed. They're often, it's not just a sacred place, even in the church.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That is welcome to talk about. And so we want to have that conversation today, and we want you to start a little bit about with your testimony, and then we're kind of going to just break that down. How many years it took, right? What was healing for you? What, in the form of healing, how did that come about? All of that. We really want to hear that today because, what was you going to say, Arkham?
Start at the beginning, because I'm telling you, it's a very powerful story. Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah. Well, God, yeah. I've had to go through a long process, a long journey of healing, and but yeah, it started with experiencing dysfunction in my home that I was raised in, and seeing my mother physically abused and by the men that she was with, and being verbally abused myself, physically abused myself, at 6 years old, 7 years old, and then around 7 years old being molested by a family member. And it's something that you said, by a babysitter. This babysitter was not a female, it was a male. And the babysitter, was supposed to be, watching me and tending to me at 7 years old, got me in the bathtub and violated me in the bathtub. That was one of the first memories that I have of the molestation. And it went on to a series of sexual abuse and sexual acts that was done to me. And not only from that particular family member, but it went on to a friend of the family as well. And so from going from 6, 7, 8 years old, being molested, being raped, and it really, really, really. And then when that happened, and when I came to my mother to let her know what actually happened, and the police was called out, but at the same time, I felt so all alone. I felt so betrayed. I felt like I was all by myself, because even though the police was called out, no charges was brought up against it. The particular predator, perpetrator, it was kind of talked down, and I was actually made to seem like I was lying. And so I just felt so humiliated. I felt so embarrassed. I felt so shamed, And you talked about it, R. Collins, about, in our Black culture, so many times that we sweep things under the rug,
Yes.
And we don't want to bring shame on the family. We don't want to bring embarrassment on the family. We don't want nobody to know that these things is happening in our family, because there's a certain image, there's a certain presentation that we want to project to people that's on the outside of our house, on the outside of our family. And so it started at 6, 7, being molested and being raped and being sexually abused and physically abused and verbally abused. And when I experienced that, and then experiencing the fact that the very person that was supposed to protect me did not protect me, the very person that was supposed to defend me did not come to my defense. My mother was raising 4 kids, working 3 jobs, trying to provide. My father was in and out of prison. And so I didn't have a father there. I did not have a covering there that would prevent certain things from happening. So, and so because of that, it really, really caused a root of bitterness to be formed in me. And it just drove me into a place of rage, and drove me into a place of anger. And I began to act out at 7 years old, 8 years old, 9 years old. I began to act out and fight, fighting everybody, fighting other kids in my neighborhood, going to school, fighting kindergarten, first grade, fighting not only other peers, not only students, but even had so much rage in my heart, so much anger in my heart, that I even began to fight the teachers. I remember picking up a chair, throwing it at one of the teachers. As the teacher was telling me to calm down, James, calm down. But I was just full of rage because of being violated and being taken advantage of, and the very people that was supposed to be there to protect me didn't protect me and made me feel like I was crazy, made me feel like it was something wrong with me. So I was acting out, just looking for somebody to love me, looking for somebody to understand me, looking for somebody to hear the pain, to hear the heartache, my heartache, to hear the agony that was in my heart that I was experiencing. And I had to experience that in silence, because if I spoke up, I would be disciplined. If I spoke up, I would be reprimanded. So it was like, well, I don't even care. And so I would just act out crazy. I'm at 7, 8 years old, and I got to a place where I was so numb. Because when you've been sexually abused, when you've been sexually violated, souls that experience that, I'm telling you, your soul dies on the inside. There's something in you that dies. There's something in you that's crushed, and you become numb on the inside. And I'm telling you, my brother and my sister, I was so numb, but then I was at a place where I wanted everybody to feel what I felt, because nobody would hear me. Nobody would listen to me. I wanted everybody to feel what I felt. So in those moments of anger, if those moments of rage, I wanted to hurt everybody that was around me. You know, they say that hurt people hurt people. You know, that when you're hurt, you get into this pattern of not just being hurt, but hurting people, violating people. Yeah. And I wanted everybody just to feel just a small portion of what I felt, the agony that I felt on the inside. And so it drove me to going out in the streets at such a young age, associate myself with gang culture at such a young age. And because of that anger, because of that rage, and it drove me to criminal activity, bro and sister. At 8, 9 years old, I was breaking into people's houses. At 8, 9 years old, I was stealing out of stores. I was trying to steal people's cars, and my God, vandalizing and committing GTA and just burglary. I just was in a place of self-destruction. And I found myself at 8 years old at the first time I was at school. I began to just lose it, go crazy. I was kicking the chairs, throwing the tables, had attacked one of the students. And for the first time at 8 years old, I went to juvenile hall. At 8 years old, they put handcuffs on me like I was a criminal. At 8 years old? 8 years old. Yeah. Yeah. They put me in the back of the police car like I was America's #1 criminal. Like I was, and they hauled me to juvenile hall for the first time at 8 years old. And from 8 years old, the first time being in juvenile hall, I went on to go into over 7 different juvenile halls in the state of California. From between 8 and 10 and a half, I went to over 7 different juvenile halls. And not only to juvenile halls, but because I was so out of control and my mom felt like she could not handle me and she didn't know what to do with me. My God, they even at that point, she allowed the opinions of psychiatrists and psychologists to diagnose me at 7 years old. How do you diagnose a little kid as bipolar at 7?
without taking in their trauma, without taking the history of their trauma in. And being just abysmal to what your history was. It's amazing.
Yeah. They didn't even consider the dysfunction that I was growing up in at my house. They didn't consider the hell that I was going through at home. They didn't consider the abuse that I was being exposed to that my mother was going through at home. They didn't consider the being a product of alcoholism and drug addiction that from my father and in the relationship that my mother was in. They didn't consider none of that. They just immediately stigmatized me at 7 years old, 8 years old, as bipolar, and we understand dealing with our Black culture and dealing with our culture, how they want to stigmatize us and put those labels on us. And
as a Black clinician, I see that.
Drug you up.
Yeah, they want to drug you up.
They want to drug you up.
And as a Black clinician, not to interrupt you, because I know you're on the roll, and this is a very powerful, you have so many points in here we're going to go back to. But as a Black clinician, I have to often advocate for 3 diagnoses they want to hit our children with without looking at their trauma: bipolar, schizophrenia, and conduct disorder.
Yes.
And they don't want to take that in account, a trauma-informed cultural lens. The disparities, the dysfunction oftentimes that the Black community has struggled with, has a history of struggling with. And you, sir, are a prime example of how you've overcame. So please finish your testimony. Yes.
Yeah, that definitely has to be pointed out. Thank you for sharing that, and yeah, they diagnosed me bipolar and conduct disorder. I'm glad that you pointed that out, and so, but I was just a little boy crying out for help. I was a little boy.
So real quick, sorry to cut you off again. So what was your experience like when they took you to juvenile at 8 years old after the the experiences that you had?
You know what? At that point, I was kind of scared because it was a very new thing for me. It was a very unfamiliar territory for me. But at that point, you know what? My heart was so hardened at that point, at 8 years old, that it really didn't matter. I was at a place where I was suicidal. I was at a place where I just really didn't care about anything. It didn't really matter to me. So, at that point, going to juvenile hall, it was a scary thing, but I really didn't care. I had I don't care attitude,
Yeah.
And so just to break that down, let's stay here at 8 years old, 8 and 9, because it's a lot of information you gave us. We need to process, and I need to check in with our viewers. We got a lot of we have to take this as a therapeutic understanding of what's going on, right, within our Black community. And I want to be very acknowledgeable about your trauma, and I also want to check in online with what people are hearing and making sure people are okay. If you can just give me a thumbs up that everyone's okay. If you need us to say a prayer, we need to do some grounding right now, or even some breathing techniques on what we're processing. Please let us know, because this is some heavy stuff.
Yeah.
And we want to acknowledge our brother and stand with our brother for his courage, first of all.
You're very courageous, brother. And I want you to know, first of all, I love you for bringing this to light, because, like I said, in the Black community, we don't talk about this, especially with our males. We do not talk about it. We do not, and there's a lot of people, and I'm sure even some of our viewers that have experienced some of the same things.
Yes.
But it has been hidden for so long, that it's been suppressed, and like you said, it causes for an individual to lash out, and people don't understand, the history behind why a person is lashing out.
So with that being said, you led us to our segue, because we're going to do this in a 2-part episode. This is some deep stuff, and it has layers. It has layers to your story. You have the ultimate overcoming story, just like a lot with our Collins. But I want to break this down for our viewers. So when you called on the authorities and you told the authorities what were happening with you as far as being sexually assaulted, what was one of the first individuals you told? Was it a teacher? Was it who believed you? Who didn't believe you?
Well, the first person I told was my mom, my mother. What happened, and we was taught, well, in my house, and this is a typical, situation in the black community, black culture, that we taught what happens in the house stays in the house.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah. Say it one more time.
Yeah.
Say it one more time for the people in the back.
Yeah, we're taught in the black community, in the black culture, that what happens in the house stays in the house.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I would not dare go outside the house and tell anybody about what was going on in our house, even if it was toxic, even if it was damaging.
Now, why was that? The greater threat was behind the home wall. So why were you so in tune with what your mama was saying? Explain that from a child's perspective, please.
I definitely, wanted to, as a child, you hang off of every word that your parents tell you.
Mm-hmm.
As a child, you don't know no difference. You just know what you're being taught. Yes. As children, we're the sum total of either good or bad advice, good or bad instructions, or good and bad examples. So, this is what my mother told me, and I wanted to be a good boy.
Yeah.
So
you wanted acceptance. Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
And so, what were some of the risk factors? So, for some of the parents who, like me, I'm very cautious, and I am very upfront with what I'm going to tolerate around my children. Just seeing the vicarious trauma that I've seen and heard in therapy. And like our Collins, we have a lot of the same belief systems about believing our children and supporting them in their growth. What were some of the risk factors that you think could have been avoided or were just there and that led to you being exposed and hurt in this way?
What was the risk factors? Well, the thing about it is, growing up in a house where, there was no open dialogue in my house.
Okay, come on now.
There was no open communication. There was no engagement in my house as far as a mother, because she was, always working, so it was never really that time that was spent, with us as kids, really. I mean, to the point where, it created a culture, a safe place.
Yes.
It created a secure place, where I could come to my mother, and talk to her about any and everything, First of all, I was already looked at as the black sheep of the family. I was already, when anything went wrong in my house, it was James that did it. So, I was already looked at as, a baby's kid.
That's actually a theory behind that, brother. So you talked about alcohol and substance abuse in your family. We call that the dependent family. So the dependent family often takes on roles in dysfunctionality. What you're describing is the scapegoat or the problem child. And the caregiver often blames and projects the problems of the family unit onto the problem child. Mm-hmm. But that's one of the very roles that we see in the dependent family. And so as you begin to break down all the risk factors, drugs, alcoholism in your father's side, was he there as a father? Was he absent? Was he there?
My dad wasn't. No, he wasn't there. He was out. He had allowed his addiction to drive him away from the family and led him into prison, and that became a continual pattern growing up. My dad was in and out of prison, or he was, occupied by his drug occupation. So it is alcoholism. So my daddy was not present, and so that opened the door for other predators.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we're getting at. Go ahead.
So let me ask you a question. So the perpetrator was not caught. Nothing happened to the perpetrator when the police were informed. Am I correct about that?
Yeah, you're right. They were called. They came, but nothing was done.
So do you think that the outcome of how you responded, or how everything went in your life thus after, do you think that it would have been different, the outcome?
Yeah, but I believe that it would have been different because as kids, my sister mentioned something earlier that I was looking for acceptance, and so as human beings,
Yes.
For us to be grow up and develop properly, that we have to grow up in a healthy environment, and part of that being growing up in a healthy environment is receiving love.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Being affirmed.
Yes.
Growing up in an atmosphere where you are accepted and there is a sense of belonging and safety and security. This is what we're looking for.
Stay right there for a minute, because you spitting so much game.
Yeah,
you got our comments going off the hook. You spitting so much game about just painting this picture for us and being knowledgeable and how you're going about it. So when you said safety, when you said love, when you said affirmation and validation, those are core principles that we often see are lacking in a family of dysfunction.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of times that adds to the risk factor also. And so if you were to now in a way go back and be able to talk to your younger self, what person, what intervention, what thing could your older self say to your younger self in that moment to help you cope with what was going on inside of you, inside of your heart?
What would my older self say to my younger self to help me cope with the trauma?
Yes.
The first thing I would say to my younger self is that it's not your fault. Because a lot of times victims of sexual abuse, physical abuse, whatever type of abuse, but really, sexual abuse, one of the things that really drives a lot of people into some self-destructive behavior as a result of experience that trauma is feeling like you're guilty, the guilty party.
Come on now.
Yeah, that's
feeling
true.
like
Come on now.
it's your fault. You deserve to be victimized. So that would be one of the first things that I would tell my younger self. I would tell my younger self that it's not your fault, James. You didn't ask to be violated, James.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things that I would tell myself, that it's not your fault, that you're not the guilty. It's nothing that you did or that you could have done that would make you deserve what you experienced.
Yes.
The second thing that I would tell myself is, was you going to say something? I don't know.
No,
Go ahead.
The second thing I would tell myself is, because a lot of times being a victim of sexual abuse and going through trauma like that, we take on the guilt of the trauma.
Yes.
And because of that, we engage in self-inflicted pain.
Come on now. Come on now. You going somewhere with it. Make it plain.
You find yourself doing things that are self-destructive and that would afflict yourself. And you see, people look on the outside. This is why I've learned not to judge people in their condition. I learned not to judge people in their struggles. I learned not to judge people with their issues, because you're just seeing 10% because of what their behavior shows. But you don't see the 90% of what's going on the inside. It's called the iceberg principle.
Come on now. Break it down.
And when you see the iceberg in the water, you only see 10% of the iceberg. That's visible, that's tangible. But the other 90% is deep under the surface. And so you see a lot of people driven to alcohol addiction, to drug addiction, and you see a lot of people driven to certain criminal behavior and certain things, not making excuses for their behavior. Because when you get into adulthood, you're responsible for your decisions, and decisions decide destiny, and choices determines consequences. But you don't know what led people there in their childhood and their early adolescent experiencing trauma, and they took on the guilt, and they're trying to afflict themselves, and so they try to bury the pain of it through alcohol and drugs and sex.
Come on, James.
Come on, all those things. But I would tell myself, you're not guilty. You didn't deserve this. The second thing I would tell myself, I would tell myself that you are free. You're free.
Wow. Break that down. Break that down, please.
That's powerful.
My God.
Yeah.
In other words, what I went through, that it does not define me.
Come on. I'm about to catch the Holy Ghost up in here. Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
In words, I don't have to become a product of my pain.
Come on.
I don't have to become a product of my past. I can be a product of the promises of God. And God has a remedy for our trauma. God has an antidote for our dysfunction. And he says, all of that hurt, all of that pain, all of that brokenness that you've gone through in your childhood, I died and I shed my blood so that you can be free from that. And you don't have to keep on reliving that experience no more. You can be free from those memories. You know, a lot of the reason why people are stuck where they are, because they're living in the memories of what they went through.
That is powerful.
And I found that memories is replaying the past. And as long as you stay in your memories and in your history, and you keep on replaying it, you keep on re-experiencing it. And you stay in that pattern and that cycle of it. But I would tell my younger self, you have permission to live beyond your trauma. You have permission to live beyond the abuse. That you might have went through it, but that doesn't make you it.
Come on now. Come on now.
Those are some of the things that I would
make it plain, because you know you're under the anointing right now. I don't tell a lot of people that. I don't fool with it. You under the anointing right now.
I know you're real.
Yeah. And so right now there is breakthrough going on even in this chat. You're touching people right now by your testimony, by affirming some of the things that they've been struggling with for years.
Yes.
In their childhood, 20, 30 years. Okay. Yes. From us not being able to have this courageous conversation we're having right now.
Yeah.
So glory be to God for creating even this moment right now in time. You know?
And I'm gonna tell you something, James, you know, your testimony, the things that you went through, you know, the devil meant it for bad, but God meant it for good. You're gonna touch so many lives. Because you even touched my life. When I heard the testimony, brother, I mean, I sat there and I was glued to the screen, and it was so powerful. And I'm just gonna tell you, you're gonna, because in the Black community, you know, it's one thing when there's sexual assault by a woman, but when there's sexual assault by a male on a child, and you were a baby, you were a child. It was, you know, a lot of men that are sexually assaulted, they feel embarrassed, they feel ashamed, they don't want to openly come out with it. And a lot of people don't understand why you have some of them that have lost their mind, they're out there, they're in prison, and some of them to an early grave. Why? Because some of them just stopped caring, you know, and I know a few. So, you know, it's very, it's very courageous of you to tell your testimony. You are a child of God, because real children of God, you know, will do what you're doing exactly right now, man. And I take my hat off to you. Yes. And brother, you know,
just affirming so many things.
Man, I know that so many people are getting so many breakthroughs right now just by your words. You know, I mean, I never had the experience, but just based off of what you're saying, like it can apply to so many different things in life. You know, especially when you were talking about the memories and holding on to those things and replaying. And
I want to go back to that because most kids that I talk to in therapy, they suppress it and they don't have the memory.
Yeah.
Some kids, you know, they have issues with even just going to someone and actually talking about it with feeling that shame. Mm-hmm. But before we go there, I'm going to offer some statistics because we have to break this conversation up. It's heavy, James.
Very heavy.
So I'm going to offer some statistics. And, you know, I always want to back our research up with what you see in front. A lot of you all don't understand the staggering amounts of the percentage of sexually abused children in the United States. So we're going to start with males because today that's what our podcast is about. And it says here, and I got this off of Lawrence Kids. So lawrencekids.org is a website that's committed just to sexual assault on children. And they have all the updated advocacy resources for parents. Sometimes the sexual assault happens with brother and sister or with cousin to cousin, and you don't know what to do. Mm-hmm. You can't put one kid out of the house. Usually CPS requests that you do, but you can't put one kid out of the house and try to keep the other.
It's a bad situation.
It's a bad situation. And a lot of times your hands are full with decision making, right? So you have to go to culturally competent, empathetic, trauma-informed therapists. What James had was not culturally competent, trauma-informed therapy. And I'm going to speak on that as a specialist in trauma-informed care. But 1 in 5 boys, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you got sexually assaulted. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You got sexually assaulted.
That is a lot.
Okay. 1 in 5 boys are sexually abused before the age of 18. Okay. 1 in 5 children are solicited. 1 in 5 children are solicited sexually while on the internet. Remember, the internet is a big mode of information and channels for predators to prey on. Okay. Approximately 20% of the victims of sexual abuse are under the age of 8. Okay. The worst lasting.
Real quick, on that. And you were under the age of 8. Am I correct?
You're right. Yeah.
Wow. That's crazy.
Okay. The worst lasting emotional damage when a child's sexual abuse started before the age of 6 lasts for several years. It's just not within that one time. And it increases the suicidal rate to 42%. Mm-hmm. So when James talked about suicide as a means of coping, because suicide is a means of coping for some people.
It is.
When you feel like your mind and your heart and your body can't take no more, that's a way of coping for some people.
Yeah.
Right? And so looking at all the million survivors of sexual abuse in America and how we often shame, and I want you to destigmatize this right now, because the Black community wants to put 2 and 2 together. So I want you to destigmatize this. And I'm going to ask you a direct question because I'm real like that. Does getting raped by a man onto man present yourself, the victim, as someone who goes into homosexuality?
It can, yeah.
Okay.
It can be because when you validate that like that, and a lot of things that we experiencing in our Black community and Black culture, you know, a lot of what today's young people are experiencing is the curse of fatherlessness.
Yeah, yeah.
And when you don't have a father in your life that is there to model what real manhood, first of all, masculinity, not just talking about godly manhood, character and integrity, but what true masculinity looks like. you know, and then you're validated like that as a little kid and predisposed to sex like that, sex like that, it brings you into a state of confusion.
Yes,
yeah. Real quick, James,
yes,
because especially if you're innocent, I believe, and you don't know that kind of lifestyle, and the first experience you have is with an adult, and you're a little baby, because you were a baby, man.
Right.
You're a little baby, and that's the first experience you have. That's the thing that's like you're going back to those memories that we were talking about.
Yes.
That's the thing that is implanted in your mind, and after a while, it becomes okay to the child. You see what I'm saying?
Yes, and so oftentimes a lot of people don't know, we have juvenile sex offenders. That's what they call them. Those children repeat the sexual acts on the other children that are within their home or within their environment. They don't know they're not supposed to. They do what they see, what they hear around the house, and then they act on it. And so we have to be very careful and conscientious on even who we allow in our home.
Yes.
Yes.
And I want you to talk more about, I don't want you to give any names or descriptions, but I want you to paint a picture to the parents that are on the podcast on how this perpetrator surrounded himself within your safe environment.
I'm so angry right now.
How did he penetrate himself through the safety net of your safe environment? How did he do that?
Was he a friend? Or did he present himself?
I'm sorry, what you were saying?
Just in case he heard me. Was he like did he present himself friendly? Was he like very...
Did he groom you? What are some of the things we need to look for as adult parents, even children?
And these perpetrators.
And some of the individuals that try to surround us and our children, what do we need to look for, James? You speak first before I speak.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, when we talking about perpetrator, it was more than one, so it was perpetrators.
Oh my God.
My goodness, James. My goodness.
I could, yeah. So, and I'm very, and me being a parent now. And actually, my son, James Jr., is getting ready to turn 4 on February 28th.
Congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you. And that's my little man, my little mini me. But and then on having a son, and unfortunately, me and his mother is not there, and he has to come between 2 separate houses. Man, it really, I'm just, man, very prayerful every day. You know, because I can't be there when he's in his mama's house, you know, and monitor who's in her house. You know, it's a very serious thing for me.
She need to know you're gonna knock somebody down, because I'm gonna knock somebody down for mine. That's not trauma informed, but I'm so sorry. I had to say that discretion.
Yeah, it's gonna be.
Come on now.
Let me hear something about.
It's not trauma informed. How I'm talking as a therapist. I just y'all just took the therapist hat off and put Rebel Ray's hat on.
Man, let me tell you something. I got saved in prison. Had a prison ministry before, and I'll have it again for my son.
All right, Doc. Come on, you and me both.
Come on now.
So
our children, gotta fight for our children.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Trust me, I'm like my godmother, Dr. Wanda Davis. I'll kill them and then let God know that I did it afterwards.
Wow.
Yes. I'm right along with you. You know. So going back to the question, what are some things that like some of the parents on the podcast need to look out for in these perpetrators? You know what I mean? Because some of them, I don't believe, are going to come like with the horns.
No, they're not going to come with the horns. So describe a perpetrator. Kind of paint a picture of a perpetrator. What does he do?
The perpetrator is like a snake. A snake just don't come out immediately to attack its victim. The snake masquerades itself. The snake assimilates in the environment that it's in and camouflages itself in the environment so that it can catch its victim in a vulnerable place in space. And so the perpetrator, usually it was a friend of, it was a family friend, one of them. The other one was in my family, and they learn how to assimilate themselves within the family framework, and and present a false presentation of love, of concern, of support, but all the while they had a motive of why they were showing this false presentation of love, support, and they wanted to get me in a vulnerable place, get me in an isolated place. This particular, the first person that validated me was a family member, and they got me all alone. Like I said, they was babysitting. I was by myself. They got me in a vulnerable place. They were supposed to be bathing me as a little kid, and they violated me in the bathtub. That was the first time. The second time that they violated me was in my room, while my mother, in the middle of the night, while my mom was in her room, sleep at nighttime, violated me, and then threatened me and said, if I tell mom, she's not going to. First of all, they said, if I tell your mom, she's not going to believe you because you always getting in trouble anyway. So it's my word as an adult over your word. Third of all, they use fear. They use that fear tactic. And another thing they used was saying that if I told anybody that they would kill me. They threatened my life. So
now everything that you're saying, I just want to normalize them. This is the basis of what when it comes to sexual assault. And when I'm talking about sexual assault, it is an umbrella term for sexual penetration, rape, a sexual filling that is not good touches, inappropriateness and grooming. So a lot of you all don't know what sexual grooming is. Sexual grooming, it looks like sometimes buying the kid presents, candy, reassuring that that you'll take care of their parents, and nicely always coaching and modeling hand touches in different places. That's kind of like what sexual grooming looks like. And so oftentimes, ladies, and I'm talking to you, I'm going to talk to the ladies right now. Oftentimes, we may put our needs for affection, for love, for attention from someone we're dating, okay? And that's someone who you're trying to date sought you out only for your children. I need you to hear me right now. I'm going to say it again. Don't get too far above yourself, thinking you fine, thinking you the one, and you're not keeping game.
Yeah, come on, speak that.
On who is coming by, trying to sweet talk you, trying to woo you, because his eye is not on you. It's on the prize in the back of you. You are the first defense of your home. If you don't have a man within the home, you're a single mother, you must be woke and you must look at the signs. Because pedophilia is everywhere. It's not talked about in the Black community. Oftentimes we see this white man, blue eyes and brown hair, white. We think he looks like a Jeffrey Dahmer and he's a pedophile. He's a someone. No, they come in all different shapes, colors, and sizes. They prefer girls. They prefer boys, and they prefer babies.
Yes.
I am talking as clear as possible as I can. So you have to be alert. You have to look for the signs. You can't be so eager for attention and love, not seeing that the perpetrator has come behind what you have as a safety net because you're not woke.
Yeah, and it is, and you're so right, and I'm happy that you stated that, because a lot of women, they become so vulnerable that, after a while of them not having someone, that they accept anybody around their environment without first analyzing who this person really is. And it is very important and very crucial. And sometimes, a person who has these characteristics will show you in certain ways, and you have to pick up on it. It is very important. Now, James, I want to ask you a question. You said that your mom didn't believe you. Am I right?
Yes.
And it was something else I was going to say.
That's okay. Take your time with this. This right here is some deep conversation. We're not going to get it all in an hour and a half.
Now, do you think, and I just want to ask you an open, honest question. Do you think, based on the fact that your mom didn't believe you, do you think that she didn't want to look like a bad mother and like a mother who allowed that to go on, or do you think she just didn't believe you?
I think it might be a combination of both. On one hand, I believe that certainly she did not want to bring shame to her as a parent, as a mother, but at the same time, because I was, as a little kid, I was a little hellion. I was always in trouble and doing stuff. But so I think on one hand, she didn't want to bring shame and embarrassment to her as a parent. On the other hand, she probably didn't believe me as well, because I would do stuff and say stuff just to bring confusion, because I was going through so much on the inside, so I just wanted to cause constant chaos and confusion, because I felt like I wasn't being heard. So I'm like, wow, they gonna hear me. I'm gonna do something. I'm gonna say something.
Now there's an old proverb, African proverb, and the African proverb says, if you do not invite the child into the village to feel its warmth, he will burn the village down to feel its warmth. You as a community member, all of us, kids alike, if we was kids, we should have came around you. And you are a perfect example how our children drop through the system, or they stay in the system, and there's a recidivism that happens, right? We call the school to prison pipeline, or we call it the CBS to prison pipeline. Okay? All because you were misdiagnosed. They did not pay attention to your trauma. And I'm going to be honest with you, because I'm going to hit y'all with the real always. You was black. Because you said that you were hurting in this way, you were a young black boy, the biases of those authorities that were over your care, whether it be CBS or juvenile hall, only looked at your behaviors.
Yes.
They didn't look at your cognitive development, your processing development, your ability to even phantom the trauma that happened to you. They didn't take none of that into consideration. All they saw was the outside. It's a little black boy with no daddy, nobody to come for him, and they treat you as such. And us as the black community got to stand up against that. When you see that's happening to any of our fellow kids, you could be a mentor. You could be a stand-in. And to my white allies, I told my white allies to get on here tonight. My counterparts, my colleagues, because they need to be informed, because they're gonna be having some black kids on their caseloads, and they need to know firsthand what it looked like, from what an adult can go back and reflect what happened, how they were mishandled. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely.
It's important that we tell your story, and we tell it in a transparent way that others can be delivered and led to healing, because that's what it's about. And so the second episode, we're going to talk about your healing, but we're going to stay right here about breaking this thing down. Now, I'm going to go back to the babysitter. The babysitter was a male in your case. I'm going to talk to the males who were sexually assaulted by the female babysitters that was left at their homes to care for them. Now, the many individuals that I came across, happy to talk to, engage in, they will deny the fact that they were ever sexually assaulted because it was a girl. And I'm going to say that one more time. If you 9 and she 18, 17, 19, she watching your kids and she sleeping, that's a kid. Whether you think she a female or not, whether you think that's cute to get laid and get some older whatever, she a pedophile.
Definitely.
She wrong. She touched somebody's baby.
Yes.
And she need to be set aside somewhere, taken out back. I'm just going to say it like that.
Do you think it's a double standard?
Oh, yeah, it is.
Like,
that's why I said that discretion.
Yeah.
It's a double standard.
There's definitely a double standard. And a sad thing, some fathers will allow their young children, male children, 9, 10 years old, to actually have sexual interactions with a grown woman to show himself that he is not going to grow up to be homosexual or grow up
That's
to
a
be
false pretense.
soft. And this is
when you submitted. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I'm passionate about this.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
no, definitely.
I started off in CPS, y'all.
Mm-hmm. But
that's sexual. Let me take my time.
No, go ahead.
I get angry.
No, you and me
and
both.
I get passionate. And
yeah, me too.
So let me get myself together. Yeah. That is sexual assault and infliction that you putting on your baby. You yourself.
Yes.
And then you wonder why he grow up, he think it's okay to have 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 20 baby mamas with a whole bunch of babies running around here. Uh-oh, hello, did she say it? Did Rebel, huh? Did Rebel Ray say it? I said it? Because you're modeling that behavior, that unhealthy sexual behavior. There's healthy sex and interaction, and then there's unhealthy modeling and interaction.
Well, there ain't nothing healthy about a young 9, 10 year, 13, 14, 15 year old boys messing with grown women. There's nothing healthy about that, y'all. And
that's been what in all communities that I know of.
Yeah. So let's get back to your story.
Rite of passage.
So you were 8 years old. No, what age were you actually when these offenses happened? It happened 2 different times. So were you the same age or were you different ages?
Between 7 and 8 years old.
And that was what the statistics were saying.
That's what the statistics said.
Yeah. So having this information, you're incarcerated at 8 years old, which to me is so unheard of. Who goes to jail at 8 years old? So just go into that story just a little bit and your experience, and we'll get back to what we're talking about. But let's get to some of your experiences there. And did you have any encounters while you were there with any sexual predators?
Yeah. Well, you talking about the first time?
When you went to jail at 8 years old and you were handcuffed and taken to jail.
The first time I went was from school. They couldn't get a hold of my mother because she was working, and I had got in an physical altercation at the Taxum. One of my fellow students, one of the other kids, and they was trying to the principal was in the principal office and counselors and everybody. They were trying to calm me down, and and I was kind of like in a out of control place. So they called the police, and I was cussing out I cussed out the police, and so I guess the police got mad. And they wanted to usurp their authority over me at 8 years old. And so they decided to put the handcuffs on me, send me to juvenile hall, I guess, to make a statement of their authority and abuse their power. And the first time I went to juvenile hall, I actually didn't stay there long enough because they put me in a holding cell. And my mother came and got me like about 3 or 4 hours after. But the second time I went to juvenile hall, because I'd probably been to juvenile hall.
You were on the second time, not to cut you off, because I remember you stating something about you did about, was it 5 years, something, a long stretch of time?
Yeah, that 6.5 years is down the line at 10.5.
Got it. Okay.
That wasn't in juvenile hall. That was in juvenile prison. That was in California Youth Authority, which is
got it.
prison for adults.
Okay.
I finally graduated from being in over 7 different juvenile halls in California, been to juvenile hall probably about 10 times before I hit 10 years old. Then went to to boot camp, and then finally into CYA. But in between that time, I was thrown into foster care system, group homes, so most of my childhood was not at home. Most of my childhood was going from juvenile hall.
You were in the system.
Yeah.
You became a system child, and the system failed you. Your community failed you.
Yeah, exactly. So, but in my encounter of being locked up in juvenile halls and going from juvenile hall, boot camp, group homes, foster care, that sexual culture was definitely very much a part of my experience, because like you got a whole lot of young men, young boys, and young teenagers that have become a product of victimization like I was, So I definitely witnessed I witnessed people getting raped when I was locked up. I seen a lot of sexual, behavior when I was locked up and in group homes and situations. I remember almost getting charged with a charge in a foster home, almost getting charged for physical bodily harm because my quote unquote foster brother that I was in room with, he was gay. It was a Caucasian boy, and he kept on trying to make advances to me. And I told my foster parents, you better remove me from the room because I don't get down like that, And they did not listen. And so one moment of something happened, and I was angry. I went back to the room, laid on the bed to try to just get away from everybody. This boy came and tried to make advances of me, and all I know, I blacked out. I beat him, and he ended up in the hospital with a fractured jaw, nose, 2 black eyes, and But yeah, experiencing sexual activity and being confronted with that happened that became normal for me.
And I'm seeing that. Then that's why I was asking, because a lot of, and especially with your situation and you experiencing group homes and going to jail and juvenile and a lot of those things happen during those times. And, especially from the onset of it, just how you stated how it happened. And from that point on, it seemed like a pattern, and so you're in juvenile, you're going through group home. First you were going through. So what happened first? What caused you to go to the group home?
Well, the first time I went to the group home is because about, I guess, the third time of being locked up in juvenile hall, for stealing something, they decided to put me in a group home that quote unquote had some type of treatment. And because they said I was out of control, my mom couldn't handle me. So they put me in a group home. That was the first time that I went to a group home. That was probably about eight and a half. I was around 8.5. And
okay.
Let me ask you one more question. So
wow.
During because I'm noticing this, like a lot of this stuff happened during that time frame. Another question I want to ask, and very important for the viewers, that do have children. So let's go back to the first 2 times that you were molested by those 2 men. Did at any time after they stopped watching you, or after you were around them regularly, did you see them again, like maybe at a family picnic or a barbecue? And if so, how did you feel when that took place?
Yeah, I seen them on a regular basis. I was constantly, I constantly had to be in their presence. At one point, and initially, I was angry, I was hurt, but after a while, like my sister said, I began to suppress those feelings and buried them and tried to forget about it, and at that point, I try to forget about it. I try to make it seem like it didn't happen, and on top of that, when it did happen, they treated me, they tried to treat me with try to, buy me things,
Now that was their reaction towards you. They wanted to buy you things. Now, do you think that was because they wanted you to keep that information suppressed so that you wouldn't, sort of tell on them?
Yeah, they wanted me to keep that. Yeah, they wanted me to keep it suppressed. And also this is for parents as well.
Mm-hmm.
You got to be careful when you see somebody always want to be, I don't want to just be paranoid, but as parents, when you got adults, that always want to be like just super kind to one particular child or always want to do something and buy stuff for one particular child, you got to take notice of that, especially singling all the other kids out or whatever, because they were doing that. And what they did, they created a reward system.
Yeah, please explain that.
A reward system, meaning that if I allow them to penetrate me, then they would buy me ice cream and buy me what I want, toys. And
now
that's part of grooming.
Of them?
Yeah, that's part of grooming.
Oh, was that both of them? Yeah.
One in particular.
Okay.
And they did that as a reward system, which was a part of, like my sister said, grooming, and it was a part of manipulation.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, and that right there is very important for parents to know. And again, going back to what Ms. Rebel Ray was saying, please, parents, do not over-familiarize your children with people that you do not know. And even if you do know them, be careful. Be careful. Because with this story, a lot of, like I said, a lot of those perpetrators are going to come off friendly. They're going to come off, loving. They're going to come off. They're not going to come, like I said, with the horns and, looking like a kidnapper. We all know what a kidnapper looks like. The guy who don't have the mustache, who sits at the playground and watches the little kids play. That's a lot of the times that's not how the kidnapper is going to come. And sometimes, the molester. And sometimes the molester is going to be a family friend, a family member, an uncle, a brother. We have to be very careful. Me in particular, I know a lot of people probably get upset with me because I'm so cautious of where I let my kids go, who I let my kids with. I'm always checking, and it is nothing to do with them because it is everything to do with just in case. Because I don't want to be that parent that is so trusting and so loving of people that my kids get too comfortable with them, and then that reward system thing that you're talking about comes to play. Oh, let me take your kids, to the skating ring or to the movie theater or to see.
It's over familiarity that you or will be struggling with some of your kiddos, right? It's over familiarity and there should be certain boundaries that should be put into place. James, we're at the mark where we need to bring it together. But we're going to have you back on next Friday. We're going to talk about your transition.
The healing. If you're willing, we just threw you on the show. Are you able to be back on the show with us next Friday to talk about how you overcame these things? Because we don't know your schedule. If not, then we'll figure that out.
Let me see. I know I got a TV show I got to do on Thursday. Let me see. Hold on 1 second.
While he's looking into that, ladies and gentlemen, there are certain signs that, as a therapist, we ask and look for and we assess. And so I'm going to share that with you now. Abnormal bedwetting, or your nieces, nocturnal most of the time at night, right? It came out of nowhere, bedwetting. You'll see irregular mood swings, irritability, agitation within the child, and it came out of nowhere, right? Where is little Timmy getting all this stuff from, right? Why is Jerome acting like that? You'll see isolated behaviors, or you'll see behaviors where they just want to run away from the home. If you see your children begging for you to stay behind, say you're a working parent and they're begging you to stay behind, those are signs.
Pay attention.
Pay attention to that. If you see your child in a very hypersexual way engaging in play, and you're wondering where they got those notions from, sometimes you can't jump to conclusions, right? My CPS vicarious trauma and secondary trauma sometimes makes me jump to conclusions. You have to kind of assess the situation. You have to do it in a trauma-informed way where you can keep the open line of communication that James was talking about open. So you don't want to scare your kids so where they close down for fear of retribution or fear they're going to get whooped or discipline. You got to do it in a kind, caring way where you open the dialogue. There has to be trust there. If there's no trust, James, back this up for me.
That's right.
If there's no trust, there's no communication with children. They'll either shut down. Mm-hmm.
That's it. And yeah, I am open and I'm free to come on next Friday.
Perfect.
I appreciate
we have some of our viewers that's asking you to come back.
Yes.
And they're saying that it is very much so needed. And I believe that it is very much so needed. And I definitely 1000% appreciate you for your courage and your testimony. And next week, we want to get into the part that a lot of people haven't, kind of accessed yet. And that's the healing aspect.
Come on now,
Lord
Collins. It's important.
Yeah. And I also want to tell the parents, like, when your children tell you things and they come to you, do not ignore that, because James many times went to his mother and told her what was going on, and she did not believe him. Hear your children. They're very innocent.
And correct yourself if you can't hear within that moment because you have some bias against your children. Correct yourself.
Yes.
And validation goes it goes, James, in that moment, if your mama would have came back around and said, baby, something ain't sitting with my heart. No matter what can I do to help you?
Yeah.
Would that have changed some of your outcomes?
Man, dramatically. I would have felt like I was safe. I would have felt like, man, I had an advocate. I would have felt like somebody was there, that will stand up for me. That would have changed the course of decisions that I made and the direction in my childhood that ultimately affected my life in a dramatic way. Yeah. For sure.
So validation goes so far. Validation even goes far to the point where it allows you to recognize your sacredness again. Because when you're raped, when you're taken advantage of and you're abused, that your innocence and your sacredness is stripped. So sometimes you're lost when that happens. When James described how he was lost on the inside, he had gotten so dark and into himself, he didn't know how to express himself. He forgot his sacredness because it was stripped away. It was taken. So a lot of times as parents, we're at the forefront to encouraging that sacredness to go forth in our children. Yes. To understand that you are someone that I value. I value your opinion. I value what comes out of your mouth. I am listening. I acknowledge you. my son. I acknowledge you, my daughter. Right? And we have to take that time. And so, James, you will be co-hosting with a panel. It's going to be a panel, Archons. I was on the phone with a lot of my colleagues who do victim survival work. And you're going to go back and forth and be able to ask them questions that maybe you think some of our viewers may need to ask. Okay? You're going to be an advocate for our viewers. And so we're going to have a representative from Child Abuse Prevention Center. We're going to have a representative for Safety and Justice Crime Survivors, right? Who help with that. I am going to reach out to the attorney who handles and see if she can herself, the district attorney or the her assistant who handles sex crimes against children. And I'll try to get a CPS social worker if I can.
Yeah.
Okay. So I have some homework to do. We're going to bring this to you live. You hear me? And we're asking that you get the word out. We're asking that you like and you share this video. Follow us on YouTube.
Please.
We also have this link posted on Against All Odds page. Like that page. We talk about the things that we know need courage. God is with us, right? Yeah. Nobody can be against us, right?
That's right.
So, we go forth in the word and we are believers in healing. We have to be.
Yeah, we do.
We got to walk in that because we're against all odds.
Yeah.
Right.
And you have definitely beat the odds, my brother, because people in your situation do not come out speaking like you're speaking. They don't come out in their right mind.
Come on now.
Like I see that you're in your right mind, and I take my hat off to you, and I thank God for you.
Come on.
And I thank God for allowing you to come through and come out.
Let's go.
And I'm telling you, I believe strongly that you are going to affect a lot of people because a lot of people aren't as brave as you are. And I take my hat off to you. I'm not going to take it off, but I do take my hat off to you. I do. And I love you, brother. I do. I want you to know that
I love
from
you
the bottom
too,
of my heart. And anybody that is out there dealing with anything remotely close to this, because let me tell you, even if a child is not penetrated, just a touch, just to sit on my lap, just a sexual hug is molestation. And anybody that has a child that has expressed any of these things to you, you need to take them serious and protect your child, because your child's life is important, because you do not want them to end up in prison, psychologically messed up. They're already going to be psychologically messed up at the first onset of it. Okay, but James, I love you, brother.
We love you.
And
we're gonna leave on one note. I said I was gonna give resources, but everyone they may not make it till tomorrow. So I'm gonna give you one resource, okay? And it's the National Sexual Assault telephone hotline. Okay, I'm gonna give you that number, right? And I'm gonna put it in here. Our Collins can type it as I'm typing. The National Sexual Assault Hotline, and that is 1-800-656-HOPE. I'm going to say that again, 1-800-656-4673. It's imperative that you listen. And I thank you all for joining us.
Please share this.
I'm
sorry, what was that number again?
No worries.
Rachel, so I can
it's
give it
1-800-656-4673. Okay, there is hope. There is a tomorrow. Okay?
Yeah.
And James is this testimony for all of you out there struggling still with childhood trauma, undisclosed trauma. James is a testament. The Lord uses him on the daily to tell his story. And so we're grateful and we're thankful to you, James.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, James. Go ahead. Any last words until we see you next week?
All right. I'm grateful for y'all. I love you guys. And man, this is so important because a lot of people have lost their voice.
Yes.
Because of what they've gone through, the trauma and the pain. They've lost their voice because of the stigmas and because of the labels and because of pressure in society, especially males, men, their voice has been muted on this particular area and subject that's affecting every other area. This one area of abuse is affecting every other area of their lives.
Yes, come on.
Their relationships, their parenting, their decision making,
their healthy masculinity. Lord Jesus.
Yeah. And I just thank God. And I'll tell you this, I know we're going to close, but it's funny. I'm in Los Angeles now, you know, and I guess I've been in Los Angeles for some years now, but, you know, I got to give shout out to my peoples in the 209 and stuff.
Hey, come on. Come on.
And, you know, I thank God for y'all because, you know, we grew up together in teenage years. And, the first time that I had the courage to share my story, because I was ashamed of it, I was afraid to say it. I didn't know what people would think about me. And I remember when I got my healing, I got my deliverance, when I cried out to God at 12 and a half in the mental hospital in a security ward in the correction facility I was in. And God said, if you give me all of your pain, if you give me all of the bitterness, the hurt, the anger, I'll turn it around and I'll use it as a platform to bring healing to so many people. That was at 12 and a half. But it was at 16, 17 that I had the courage to share it for the first time publicly. And that was at Greater Christ Temple now. And we, you know, churches don't have testimony services no more. But I remember on a Sunday night at evangelistic testimony service, people were testifying. And I just felt impressed in my heart to share my story. But I was so afraid, but it seemed like God pushed me out of my seat. And before you knew it, I was in front of the pulpit, in front of everybody. And I just began to share the abuse and share my testimony. And when I shared my testimony, it was like the presence of God hit that place and people were crying.
Like
God
it is now.
But one testimony out of every that I wanted to share with you, it was a sister in the church that was going to Christ Temple at that time. And I was part of the prayer team. And she asked for prayer for her brother, who was about 50 years old at that time, but was addicted to alcohol. She was asking for God to deliver him and set him free from alcohol addiction. That particular night, when I shared my testimony for the first time publicly, at the end of the service, as I was walking out of the foyer, that particular sister came up to me, was crying. She said, the brother that I asked for everybody to pray about is right here. Out of all nights and out of all services, he came that night. He heard my story. He came to me, embraced me in a hug and was crying. And he said this, and that really encouraged me to share my story. It confirmed to me what God told me, that he would bring every time I shared it. And he told me, he said, I was molested as a little kid like you. And I held on to that all these years, and it drove me to alcoholism. But he said, as a teenager, if you have the courage to share your story as a teenager, he said, then I know that I could be free. And so that night was the starting point of his change and his transformation, because I had the courage to share it. And so that's why I'm on this line tonight, because I know that every time I share what I went through, it don't matter what people think. It don't matter what people say.
Come on.
But every time I share it, I know that some life is going to be changed.
Yes.
I know that somebody is going to be empowered to live again.
Yes.
So I thank you for the opportunity. I'm excited about part 2. And I love you guys. And I'm excited about
you too, James. Love you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, James. And you're done. We're done. There's nothing more to say after that.
God bless you guys. God bless you. Thank you all for tuning in. Please, again, share, because there's a lot of people that can be delivered by my brother's testimony. Please share, because we want to stop normalizing a lot of things that has been going on. But we love you, James, and we love you guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, peace.
God bless you guys. God bless you guys.
Yes.